Welcome back to another episode of Insights with Experts, where we aim to encourage and foster discussion, learning, and creating an informed global community. To view this and other interviews in detail, head over to theseer.org, linked in the description. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe to our channel for constant updates. Enjoy the episode.
Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Insights with Experts. Joining us here today, we are very fortunate to have Mr. Alan Baker. Now, Alan is an internationally recognized martial arts defense expert and a serial entrepreneur, and he's been training continuously in the martial arts since 1981. He's actually been teaching it since 1990. He is the owner of Atlanta Martial Arts Center. He's the associate director at the Combat Submission Wrestling Association. He's the chief instructor at the AC Tactical Training Group, among various other positions and various other roles, which I'm not going to spoil now because I think we're going to get a much more interesting overview from Alan himself. So, Alan, just to start off the entire interview, how are you? How are things in the US? And yeah.
I'm good. Things are starting to tick back up in the US from the pandemic. I personally stayed pretty busy last year. I tried to use the time as in a good way as much as possible. So I was actually pretty busy last year, but everything's coming together now. Couldn't ask for it to be better.
That's awesome. Great. So Alan, as I said in my intro, I gave quite like a broad overview of who you were, some of the roles you hold and so on. But could we maybe get an overview of, I guess, what made you want to go into martial arts? What made you want to go into self-defense? Essentially, what did that road look like to stand where you are
now? Well, I was a rowdy youth. Mom was having a hard time handling me. ADHD, and she had her hands full, so she decided to take me to like a local martial arts school to, at that time, that's one of the places you could go to have discipline instilled into your child. And so my first introduction to it was like a karate class, and I went in, and normally you don't spar on the first day, you don't fight, but I liked fighting when I was a kid. So the teacher, he had two sons there, and he said, look, you can go with my two sons. And they beat me to death, and I loved it. I fell in love with it. It was a place that I could go and express energy and get it out, aggressive energy. So at that point, you could say the rest is history. I fell in love with it. When I got to the point where I was a little older and I started to look for a job, one of the main reasons I wanted a job was so that I could join all the other schools in my town. So at one point in my mid-teens, I was a member of most of the martial arts schools in the little town that I grew up in, and just continued to go after it and pursue it for years to come. Eventually, probably in the early 90s, I started to meet some gentlemen, some mentors who taught in the martial arts professionally. And they started to teach me the different things it took to start a professional career in the martial arts, start to be able to make a living at it. And once I started getting introduced to that line of thought and that source of information, I went after that just as aggressively as I did the arts in the years previous. And that brought me to pretty much where I am today. I've not only built the academy and run the academy. We're in Woodstock, Georgia now, but several other businesses that are related to the industry as well.
Now, I was reading an article by Forbes a couple weeks ago, and what the article said was 76% of people think mentors are important, but only 37% of them actually have one. So with that, how do you think what do you think some of the best ways are for students to actually find these mentors, to actually, find that one perfect person that they can really use from to actually learn?
Oh, wow. Well, first and foremost, one of the things I look for, well, I follow a principle that I learned in martial arts, and it's called being a sun student or a moon student. And the difference between those two things is a sun student or a mentor, a sun mentor will create light, where the moon student reflects light. So that's the guy that, he's got to a certain position in life, but he pretty much just repeats what he's been told. A sun student is creating information. They're that guy that is outside the box. They're probably doing things that the most of the rest of the industry thinks is crazy. But that's how most genius is created in the beginning. Nobody believes it. What you're doing is not normal. You should go back and do the normal stuff. And then 5-10 years later, everybody's doing what that person's doing. So that's one of the first things I look for in a mentor is the sun student principle. I look for the guy that is creating in his industry. He's outside the box. He might not necessarily be the most popular guy out there because, he's not following the norm. But in my experience, that is the person I want to know. And then, you've got to introduce yourself to them, make them part of your network, which, can be tricky. But the one thing that a person like that will realize is teaching is learning. And it's that way in anything. I learned it in martial arts industry, but once I got out and started putting my foot into other industries and growing businesses in other areas, I quickly learned that it applies to everything. Well, a good mentor will know that. And they not only will be aware of it, but they will seek it out because they know a teaching relationship forces them to grow. And if they are truly passionate about what they're doing, they will seek out that mentor relationship because they know it is one of the areas that creation will happen. So they're probably going to be looking for you too. But one of the things they're looking for is, the individual that's going to have passion, a good work ethic. He's willing to put in the life units, the extra time to make something happen, because that's where he is. So keep that in mind too. Are you the type of personality, or have you developed yourself to the type of personality? Have you honed your mettle so that you will be able to have something to offer to that mentor on the other end as well?
Yeah, that just really makes me think. So I interviewed somebody months and months ago. His name's Christopher, and he spent years and years in the corporate world, companies such as Cisco and so on. And he's probably one of the best mentors you'll find, arguably. And he had this rule whereby he would only give his mentees 25% of the information, and he said he wanted them to find 75% on their own. So what he's doing is he's kind of trying to evoke them to be the sun student, if that makes sense.
Right.
And there
Yeah.
you go. But yeah, so Alan, I would like to move forward into like the next big topic that we can talk about. That's really just your work as an entrepreneur in the entire martial arts, the entire self-defense space. And I think it's safe to say that your training programs are quite malleable in accordance to the needs of the customer, the needs of the client, the needs of the people that you work with. And if I'm not wrong, these have ranged from Fortune 50 corporate security teams to military groups and so on. So with this, I wanted to ask how important of a skill has this been? And when I talk about skill, I mean being able to really amend what you have to fit the needs of the specialized client that you're serving. How important has that skill been for you as an asset that's really helped you progress, that's really helped you grow as a person through the world of entrepreneurship and so on?
Honestly, huge. Um, it has affected, I run a tactical training business, and in the law enforcement, military, and personal protection industry, when they want to do defensive tactics, they will look to the martial arts world, and generally they'll bring in someone who is an expert at any given system, looking to find answers. And most of the answers that are in martial arts are designed for martial arts, not necessarily the environment of law enforcement or personal protection. So it's pretty common that they'll have a guy in, they'll work out with him, they'll try his information, and then 6 months later, they're trying somebody else. So they'll go through them pretty regularly. And one of the reasons for that is because when they finally get the information and they take it to apply it in their work, in the environment they're in, they realize quickly that the information doesn't apply. They can't do it. And they can't do it because they have to follow certain laws. They have to apply force on a force continuum. They're required by their boss to only put their hands on threats in certain ways. And this varies per area. So one of the things we did, and it's actually one of the things that makes AOMAC Tactical unique, is that we'll go in and we get introduced to your environment first, and then we design the program specifically around that environment. And we did this probably 14 years ago for the Executive Protection Institute in Virginia. They had been going through that previously mentioned process, probably going through a DT instructor every 6 months. So when they got in touch with us, we went through their school, and we had the opportunity to do some details, protection details, and see what the environment is like. What do you wear? What rules do you have to follow? Your boss can have certain things that he doesn't want you to do. He may want you to dress a certain way. All of this can affect your ability to put your hands on someone. So once we did that, we turned around and we created a program for them, which is from the ground up, specifically for their environment. And we've been with them ever since. And we took the ability to do that, to do program design, and we applied it to the law enforcement industry as well, and the military world. So to answer your question, it's one of the most valuable skills you can have. And I would say regardless of industry, you have to have the ability to create, and the ability to market what you've created too. I think those two things are equally as important. So definitely something that, to be successful, you have to hone and improve.
Have you ever had a client, or just anyone that you've worked with, which you really just haven't been to really gel with, that you've really found it's just been really hard to work with them as a whole, or just significantly more than other ones? And if so, how have you dealt with people like this? Because as students, we're always going to come across people that we don't like to work with, whether it's like a group uni project or whether it's anything like that. How do you deal with people like that?
Oh, wow. That's a life skill. I've had clients that I didn't necessarily connect with on a personality base, but they needed the skill set I had, due to the environment they were placing themselves in. To be honest, I was just shot them straight. I was honest with them. They knew there was a challenge in the relationship. That's okay. But I'm here, at that time, it was to do protection work. I'm here to protect you, and I have to be able to do my job well. It has nothing to do really with the relationship. But that's what they're hiring you for, is to do that protection work. Communication, there's going to be common ground that you can find with an individual. And obviously there's other areas too where you're not necessarily connecting. I focus on the common ground, and for instance, that client, the common ground was, we're going to keep you alive today. So, and I'm just as interested in it as you are. So, and due to those common goals, and we focused more on those. For me, in that instance, the relationship actually changed over time, because once we found that common ground, we focused on that. We started to interact and communicate around that. And then the relationship actually improved, the network opportunity.
So just to move forward, I want to move on to now martial arts. I want to move on to self-defense just as a whole, just as a concept in society now.
Mhm.
Reason being is because it seems like the age that we live in, we're hearing this from our education systems, from our unis, we're hearing this from social media and so on. And what it is, it's the entire notion that, we want to advocate peace in this new world, that the need for violence is redundant, and the whole idea that essentially we should try to create peace wherever we can. Now, in a society that is, moving towards peace to such an extent, or arguably is represented too by social media and stuff, what role do you see self-defense playing? And would you strongly, if so, why would you strongly advocate every young person to really try and at least have a certain level of self-defense knowledge in them?
Hope you're enjoying the episode so far. To learn more about Orakui as well as more information about our upcoming episodes, don't forget to follow our socials for constant updates and education content. Links are always in the description.
Well, my belief is it is a life skill. I think everyone should have at least a base understanding of it, just in case. One thing is the confidence that you're going to have if placed in a situation where you're going to have a physical encounter. It doesn't necessarily have to be a verbal encounter, physical. It could be verbal, it could be body posturing. There's lots of things that happen leading up to physical contact, just social interaction. We teach classes that just cover that topic. This is prior to ever putting your hands on someone. So just that interaction, you're going to have at some point. Whether or not it elevates to a physical level, you don't know. And, like you said, as a society looking for and headed toward peace, but you're going to have predatorial personalities in the world. It's just the nature of some individuals, and it's going to exist. Now, hopefully, you go through life and you don't ever have to experience anything like that. But you don't know, and if you just say, well, statistically, I'm going to be in this crowd that's not ever going to run into it. Well, there's a lot of people who think that way, and then they get placed in the situation, and then the outcome of what happens to them is based on their previous training or lack of it. So that's one of the reasons I think it's a life skill to have some basic understanding of how to not only protect yourself, but others, which is another vast study in itself. Is if I'm in a crowd and I see something happen, I get involved with it generally. How do you protect others? And it doesn't necessarily mean escalating violence. Self-defense, it's not commonly looked at, but the de-escalation of violence is a big part of it. Being able to place yourself in a situation and start de-escalating with verbal skills, placement of the body, understanding the big picture of the situation, and not getting caught up in the emotional moment, and that is going to go down a path that's just physical contact. Having the mental strength and ability to stay above it and realize that, the best route might be to get my friend and myself and exit if I can. I don't have to interact in this, but we know that, but the ability to do that takes training, and that is all part of self-defense, in my opinion. So, but that explanation isn't common. Most people, they think self-defense and they go, well, if somebody grabs my throat, I'm going to do this move. They grab my wrist, I'll do this. And yes, it has that element, but the truth is, if it has got that far, you've failed in so many ways in your preparation up to that moment. It's just incredible. So to answer your question, yes, I think everyone should have a basic understanding of it. That and the predatorial mindset, which is part of it as well, is trying to study and understand what the predator is thinking, what they want from you, helps you deal with those types of personalities when and if you run into them at some point in your life.
Yeah, I personally very much agree with that answer. Specifically, the phrase you said, talking about being confident in yourself. And I think what's happening is there's kind of this blurred line now in society between having confidence in yourself and being arrogant. And I think there's a blurred line between those two. And I personally think they're two separate things. I think every boy, every girl, so on should have a certain level of confidence in themselves. And what we're seeing over time, studies have shown, for example, there was one I read a few weeks ago, apparently saying that the average pressure of the men's handshake has decreased 40% between 1970 and 2017. So you have
Really?
certain, things like that. No, it's not necessarily, in action martial arts, but it's things you can do before that, like you were saying, just having the basic confidence to look someone in the eye, shake their hand firmly, and all that kind of stuff. Just on that, what do you think about that stat? The fact that the average pressure has decreased 40% over time.
Oh, wow. I think society may be losing a little bit of something that's important. When it's, I can understand expressed incorrectly it being taken as arrogance. But, I teach and I follow a lot of principles of a warrior society. And, part of studying and understanding the scale of violence and the ability to apply it, and I don't mean in a bad way. I mean, like we said earlier, if the situation arises, your ability to understand it and apply it appropriately might save your life, might save your friend's life. But that, along with that mindset and that information, what separates the warrior from the predator is a code. And, there's certain elements in that code that has to be introduced with it. And we follow that, and that helps you do the right thing and behave in the right way. So, that's an important element in it. And it's okay to be confident, to be strong. And I can understand that maybe someone who has not developed that skill yet might look at that as arrogance. But, it's like anything. If I look into another industry that I know nothing about, my first impression of it is probably wrong because I've never been exposed to it or the personalities in it. And, it's a snap judgment, but that seems to happen quite often. But once you've placed yourself into that world, even a little bit, like we said, just to get an understanding of predatorial mindset and how to handle yourself in a situation, the understanding of it will give the person that looks at it that way, maybe initially, a different view. They'll start to understand the confidence that comes with it and go, okay, I see that it's not necessarily arrogance. But like we said, you have certain personalities that will always exist. And they really sometimes want the same information for the wrong reason. And so, yes, that does exist. And, that's one of the reasons why you're preparing for it. I think, on the idea of the handshake, yeah, I think less and less people are looking at and understanding that path. So, like I said initially, it may be one of the things that society is losing a little bit or losing touch with. Because I know those warrior societies, martial art based societies are there, and those type of personalities are there. Um, and that's a good thing. Like, you have to have that balance. There's a time and a place for those personalities, and there's a time and a place for the other personalities as well.
Yeah, and I think, even when it comes to, that one point that you made, specifically talking about how we view other aspects of society and how we might come across as naive when we don't know much about it.
Yeah.
And we're talking about martial arts in this case, but I think it applies to a lot more as well. When I was back, like in high school, this was like in my middle years of high school. I looked at things like acting and drama, and I thought, wow, when is anyone ever going to use this in real life? This is the most useless thing. Next thing I know, I find myself going into drama. Fast forward, I take it in my final year subjects. I love it. I love acting. And now I look at drama, and if I didn't go into acting, I probably wouldn't be able to give public speeches the way I do, probably wouldn't be able to conduct myself in society the way I do. And it's just the fact that, the fact of how naive we are to certain aspects of society just shows that we have so much to actually learn. The big misconception is that if I take a skill, the only way I'm going to use that skill is doing what that skill is for. So no, you can use that in the corporate world. You can use that in so many areas of society. And I think that's what you've talked about here with martial arts and so on. But yeah, so just to finish off, I'd like to ask you one last question. And I don't know if you've been asked this question before, because I'm going to theme it a little bit more to where we are. It's kind of like Asia Pacific, Southeast Asia, and so on. And essentially, what you'll find here, what the culture is around here, around things like martial arts and so on, that it's very much seen as this extracurricular activity that people would do. And if you look at the average Asian household, there's this very old conception that the children have to always go into a very steady, a very secure job. It's like the lawyer, the accountant, the engineer, all that stuff. And going into really any other path is kind of seen as too risky, and so on. I want to ask you, what do you think about that? What would you say to a parent, whose kid is just told them, look, I want to go into martial arts? What would you say to a parent who perhaps has that very old-fashioned mindset that we're currently seeing now?
Oh, wow. Well, that's the path I took. And everybody thought I was crazy. But, I not only went through the industry and was successful, I created several businesses in the industry that are successful and ended up in a really good position. The thing is if that child has passion for a subject and they have the willpower in them, the passion in them to go after it, that is a powerful thing. So you can have somebody that will go for the engineer job and they may hate it. They have no real passion for it. I'm just doing it so I can make some money. That person is only going to go so far. They're going to achieve, they will arrive in life, and then they'll cruise. And I've actually have quite a few clients that have followed that path. And then once they got there, they turn around and was like, man, I wish I'd have done what you did, because you live life. For first and foremost is if you follow that avenue of passion, you're going to have more energy. You're going to enjoy life more. Money, yeah, it's important, but you find as you go through the journey, it's not as important as health, freedom, have the time to go and do the things you want to do. Yes, finance and financial support is a leg for that machine as well, but it's not the only one. The relationships you build, so it's important to keep the broad spectrum and, be supportive, because there's always a way. I mean, you can look around at some of the success stories in some areas of business that you never would have thought. There's individuals out there who didn't make it through high school and then had passion for a subject, created a product, brought it to the industry, and then now they're worth millions. And they did it because they followed their passion. So there's a lot of power in that path too. The one thing that is you have to make clear is there's a lot of work. You have to be willing to put in the extra time, the extra effort. But the cool thing is if it is a passionate path, the energy will be there because you love it. It's like I've done this for over 40 years now, and I get the comment myself now is like, when are you going to slow down? And the truth is, it's like I don't think I'm going fast. I love everything I do. I've got passion for it, and I don't go to work every day. I get up and do what I love to do and get paid for it. So the possibility is there. You could be supportive, but at the same time, give the information that anything you want to achieve, you can achieve. Whether you think you can in this moment now, most people realize they can do it after they've spent 20 years chasing a dream that was on a lower run of the ladder. And then they'll get to their goal and go, man, I should have shot higher. I didn't realize I could make this. So don't be afraid to shoot high in the beginning, but realize it's going to be work. This funny thing, we mentioned the mentors in the beginning of this conversation is seek out those mentors because they'll not only help you on that journey, but like we said earlier, they're a passion source as well. Because you get around like-minded people, it will energize you. It will drive you. And, if that's the path you're taking, there's nothing really, it's like one of the top things you can do is find a good mentor or set of mentors that is walking the same path. I could probably talk about this for another hour.
Yeah, I think we could.
Hopefully that answered the question.
Yeah, I think it did. And it's what they say. If a man loves his job, he'll never work a single day in his entire life.
Right.
So, Alan, firstly, thank you so much for the entire interview, hopping on here. But just before we leave everyone off, if we could just sum up in a few words, just the last thing the viewers listen to today. If you could leave young people today with just one piece of advice, what would that one piece of advice actually be?
You're young. You don't realize your potential yet. In other words, you don't realize what you are capable of achieving. And like we said just a minute ago, by the time you realize it, you've achieved maybe a lower goal. Understand that maybe you don't have the mindset right now to believe that you can make those large goals, but you can. And don't be afraid to plan them and go for them. Don't be afraid to invest time consistently, because you're not going to do it overnight. There's no such thing as an overnight success. The path you're going to walk is going to require consistent investment of time into the future. So prepare for that. There's going to be failures because failure is part of success. If I have time, say 10 attempts at something, 9 of them will be a failure. And, if you know that in advance, when that failure shows up, it doesn't affect you emotionally. It doesn't shut you down or cause you to stop walking forward. You just look at it and go, oh, there's the first one. Let's go find the second one. Actively seek those failures out. Create environments where you can make mistakes and get them over with, because mistakes and failures shut so many people down. And that's one of the things you have to be prepared for. Expect it. Don't let it stop you moving forward. That would be some of the things I would share